This is why your grandfather's tools still work perfectly after 60 years, while your brand new drill gave up after 18 months. And no, it's not nostalgia. It's metallurgy. Tool steel quality, economics, and a deliberate shift in how the world builds things. Start with a name everyone knows, Stanley. In 1843, Frederick Stanley opened a small shop in New Britain, Connecticut, making door bolts and wrought iron hardware. Over the next century, that shop grew into one of the most respected tool manufacturers on the planet. Stanley planes, designed by inventor Leonard Bailey, became the gold standard for woodworkers worldwide. A craftsman could buy a Stanley No. 4 smoothing plane, use it every single day for decades, and pass it down to his son in perfect working order. That wasn't unusual. That was the expectation. What made those old tools different wasn't magic. It was philosophy. Back then, manufacturers didn't just sell you the tool, they sold you spare parts. Almost all machinery was designed to last for the life of the buyer. The assumption was that you would own this thing forever, and they'd help you maintain it. Antique tools are easy to repair, easy to maintain, and most importantly, they were built to last. That's why you can still find them relatively easily today. Rusted maybe, but functional. The market itself was structured differently too. Years ago, you only really had two tiers of tools, the very good and the acceptable. If you look at an old Stanley catalog, you'll see that the cheaper tools had less polishing, less chrome, but were still just as functional. Stanley wasn't alone at the top either. Sargent and Company was making excellent American planes, and across the Atlantic, Record Tools in England was producing comparable quality. Both names you'll still find in collector circles today. What you didn't have, at all, was cheap imported tools. There was no race to the bottom. So when did things change? Ask 10 tool experts and you'll get 10 slightly different answers, but they all point to the same general era. Some say the decline began right after World War II. Others point to the mid-70s. The Sweetheart era, roughly 1920 to 1935, is widely considered Stanley's golden age, a period when the heart-shaped trademark stamped on every blade was a genuine mark of excellence. A lot of the consensus suggests that Stanley's standards specifically started slipping in the 1960s, after that golden run ended. But wherever you draw the line, the cause is the same. Tool quality started declining when the accountants took over from the engineers and craftsmen. Fine Woodworking magazine ran an analysis in 2018, comparing vintage Stanley plain blades against their modern counterparts. The results were staggering. Edge retention on the vintage blades lasted 4 to 5 times longer than the new ones. 4 to 5 times. That's not a marginal difference. That's a fundamentally different product wearing the same name. Now, someone is going to say that's just survivorship bias, and they'd be partially right. Survivorship bias is the idea that we only see the old tools that lasted. The junk from 1950 broke and got thrown away decades ago, so of course the ones still around seem better. They're the survivors. That's a fair point, and it deserves acknowledgement. But it doesn't explain everything, because the steel itself tells a different story. Modern metallurgy is, on paper, superior to anything available 100 years ago. New alloys, cryogenic treatments, computer-controlled heat treating. Today's steel can be made cleaner, harder, and more consistent than anything a 19th century Sheffield forge could produce. And Sheffield, England, represented the absolute high point of tool-making history. So, if modern steel is better, why are modern tools worse? The answer is painfully simple. Good steel costs money, and most companies are driven to reduce costs. The technology for superior steel exists today. O1 tool steel, A2 tool steel, modern powder metallurgy alloys, but most manufacturers cheap it out to save a few dollars. A lot of low-cost offshore factories have poor quality control for the materials they use, so the purity and consistency of their steel is even worse than you'd expect. A metal housing component gets replaced with reinforced plastic that technically meets the spec, but doesn't carry the same long-term durability. A hardened steel gear becomes a softer alloy. Individually, these changes seem defensible. Engineers will tell you the new part meets or exceeds the original performance standard under controlled conditions. What they won't always tell you is how it performs after 2 years of heavy use in the real world. And then there's planned obsolescence. The concept has been around longer than most people realize. In 1924, the Phoebus Cartel, a group of light bulb manufacturers, deliberately limited bulb lifespans to increase sales. By 1932, Bernard London had actually coined the term planned obsolescence in a pamphlet, arguing it could end the Great Depression. The strategy is straightforward. Use inferior materials in critical areas, put soft metal in screws. Replace metal stress-bearing components with cheap plastic, and reduce the time between repeat purchases. Once treated as a conspiracy theory, it's now an openly acknowledged industrial strategy. Stanley's own story makes this concrete. A former employee revealed that the company once conducted a study and found that the majority of their planes were purchased as gifts and given to people who didn't use them. They concluded there weren't enough people willing to pay for old-style quality to make it worth manufacturing to that standard, so they stopped. In 2010, Stanley Works merged with Black & Decker to become the world's largest tools and storage company. Stanley Black & Decker went on an acquisition spree, bringing DeWalt, Craftsman, and other brands under one roof, and the pressure to consolidate manufacturing and cut costs became enormous. By 2021 and 2022, contractors started complaining loudly about a noticeable dip in quality across product lines. Even the CEO admitted, when discussing the Craftsman acquisition, that the products had devolved. They'd migrated from made in America to virtually everything being made in China and Mexico. His words, they were in sad shape. Then, on February 26, 2026, Stanley Black & Decker announced the closure of its Myrtle Street facility in New Britain. Up to 300 workers would lose their jobs. After 183 years, the place where Stanley began was shutting down. But here's the twist, because this isn't a story about decline without redemption. While the big brands were cutting corners, something else was happening quietly on the side. In 1981, a man named Thomas Lee Nielsen founded Lee Nielsen Toolworks. His philosophy was direct. We're not making tools cheaper, we're making them the way they should be made. Lie Nielsen planes are based on the Stanley Bedrock design, Stanley's own premium line from the early 20th century, and they use A2 tool steel hardened to 60 to 62 on the Rockwell hardness scale, matching or exceeding vintage Stanley quality. A number 5 plane costs $385, and they hold their value like collector's items. In 1985, Lee Valley Tools launched Veritas, a Canadian brand using PMV11 steel, a proprietary alloy tested by Popular Woodworking to retain an edge 15 to 20% longer than even vintage Stanley tools. Contemporary educators like Paul Sellers and Rob Cosman have spent years demonstrating on YouTube that these modern premium tools, and carefully restored vintage ones, can outperform anything you'll find at a big box store today. These companies, and the craftspeople who champion them, prove that modern manufacturing can produce tools equal to or better than anything from the Golden Age. You just have to be willing to pay for it. It's also worth noting that the premium hand tool revival isn't limited to Western traditions. Japanese laminated steel planes, called kana, use a hard, high-carbon steel edge, forge-welded, to a softer iron body, a construction method that produces extraordinary edge retention and has attracted serious attention from Western woodworkers and collectors. The premium market, it turns out, is global, and people are willing. The antique repair and restoration market is estimated at $2.5 billion in 2025, projected to reach $4.2 billion by 2033. Vintage Stanley. Type 9. Number 4 planes, the sweet spot of the collector market, produced from around 1902 to 1907, regularly sell for $200 to $500. Rarer Type 1 planes from the very first production run can command far more. Even common number 4 planes average $280 on eBay. Millennials and Gen Z are driving a growing market for vintage and restoration, consistently favoring repair over replacement. Even the humble wooden handle tells this story. Hickory handles have been used for centuries because they absorb shock, resist splitting, and can be repaired and reshaped. Fiberglass handles are lighter and lower maintenance, sure, but professionals still reach for wood because after 8 hours of swinging an axe, your hands know the difference. So why do old tools feel better? It's not one thing. It's the steel, chosen for performance rather than cost. It's the design philosophy, built to last a lifetime rather than until the next purchase cycle. It's the handles, shaped from materials that work with your body rather than against it. And yes, it's the absence of a global system, designed to make caring about quality harder to execute at scale. The knowledge hasn't disappeared, though. Companies like Lie-Nielsen and Veritas prove that every single day. The question isn't whether we can make tools this well anymore. We absolutely can. The question is whether we're willing to demand it.